Mr. Bingley's Daring Proposal, based on the characters in Pride and Prejudice, by Lisa Shimkus. Prologue, August 26, 1812. Is she not the most beautiful creature you have ever laid eyes upon? Charles Bingley was admiring a caricature which he carried in a locket. The image was that of a woman, though one could not tell, just by looking at it, the exact features that the woman had. The owner could recall her looks as if he'd only spoken with her yesterday. Her eyes were as blue as the ocean, her cheeks as red as a rose, and her hair was that of golden curls. I may agree with you that she is handsome, though you and I vary in our definitions of beauty, replied his companion. Plainly speaking, I do not comprehend your attachment to that young woman. The comment only produced laughter from Bingley. Come now, Darcy, you've only just arrived in London, and already you sound as if you've been slaving away at work. Fitzwilliam Darcy had his reasons for not seeing the world through rose-colored spectacles, as Bingley did. Do not forget, my ride has been long and arduous, was his excuse. I much prefer a horse over coaches, but I would not want to bring my animals all this way. Yes, Pemberley is a fine house. I long to return to Netherfield Park myself. I am nearly done with all this paperwork, and seeing that my men are performing as they should be, Caroline and I will be ready to depart come this time tomorrow. So soon? Darcy asked. Bingley laughed. We have been in London since November of last year. I long for the country. It was true that Bingley left his home of Netherfield Park in Hertfordshire suddenly in the past year. All was for good reason. His business partner and his late father's friend, Mr. Westenra, had died suddenly. This left Bingley to deal with whatever matters were under Mr. Westenra's care. Fortune was on his side, as Bingley's late partner had a son also in the trade, and the young man was then promoted into his father's role. Now that Bingley had a trustworthy partner in place once more, he could return to the country and handle business from there. Bingley took this moment to look around the room. He and Darcy were standing in his rented apartment. The house had 3 rooms and a study. The space in which the 2 men occupied held a desk covered in Bingley's work, a fireplace, and 2 chairs for consulting business partners and guests. As much as Bingley enjoyed the house, which had ample space for Caroline, the landlady, and himself, he yearned for Netherfield Park. Bingley longed to be in his own house in the country. He tired of the constant noise outside the window, from horses trotting by to families and young lovers promenading. His room, which was in the back of the house, also overlooked a dirty, unkept yard, or what should be a yard. London itself never slept, unlike Hertfordshire, which would grow as still as a mouse in the night. Bingley found it hard to concentrate in such a busy city. He much preferred the country. Darcy pulled out one of the chairs and sat himself down. And you wish to see that woman you carry in your hand, he remarked. Bingley shut the locket and placed it back in the innermost pocket of his jacket. Most definitely. Never have I been with such a sweet and gentle creature as she, Miss Jane Bennet. Bingley and Miss Bennet met 2 years prior, when he first leased Netherfield Park. To Bingley, the eldest daughter of the Bennet family was not only beautiful, but kind and caring. She had inquired after his family and himself, and they spoke of similar topics, from poetry to operas. Bingley was immediately drawn to not only Miss Bennet's character, but the conversations they shared. It was easy for Bingley to voice himself to Miss Bennet without any judgment on her part. Miss Bennet also proved to be much like Bingley himself, and these similarities were what he had always wished for in a life partner. Bingley wanted an equal. Are you certain you are ready to leave your business to your partner and solicitor? Darcy inquired. Bingley laughed. Nonsense, Darcy. I only wish to allow them to do their part, and I my own. I can manage my work easily from Netherfield Park. I am no longer needed in London, now that young Mr. Westenra has proven he understands the business, and should they need my immediate assistance once more, they need only write. I fear you are leaving too soon, said Darcy. Bingley knew his friend was right. Darcy always had his best interests at heart. He had been like a second father to Bingley after the senior Mr. Bingley passed away. Darcy had always been the wiser of the 2 friends. Bingley withered into his chair, feeling drawn in 2 different directions by invisible forces. A part of him, the definite one that wanted to leave London, tugged to the right, while the other more uncertain side of himself pulled to the left. "Then what do you suppose I do?" he asked. "You were right in having us come here last year. I have accomplished a lot, but I also want to see Miss Bennet and Netherfield once more. I also miss our friends in the country. Truly, I tire of the city and need fresh air." Bingley could tell his friend was contemplating their situation, as Darcy sat quietly for some time. The former hoped the latter would sympathize with him and allow him to take a break. "1 month," Darcy finally said. "I say go to Netherfield Park for a month and return to see to your business." "I shall." Bingley began to gather the paperwork on his desktop so that he may begin preparing for his return journey. He was eager to reunite with the woman who had stolen his heart. Chapter 1. Mr. and Mrs. Bennet of Longbourn in Hertfordshire were fortunate to have 5 healthy children. They, however, had the misfortune of bearing only girls. This being the case, Mrs. Bennet made it her goal to ensure that each of her daughters married into wealth. With their family estate going into the hands of the nearest male heir, Mr. Bennet's cousin, a clergyman, by the name of Mr. Collins, Mrs. Bennet was even determined to marry one of her girls to the gentleman. It so happens that on this particular morning Mr. Collins came to Longbourn. Jane, the eldest, was helping cook gather vegetables from the kitchen garden when she heard voices. "Oh, it's that insufferable man! Don't just stand there! Quick, hide! Go, 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 before he sees us!" Jane looked up to see 3 of her sisters racing out of the house. Lizzie, who came after Jane in birth, gaily skipped over, while Kitty and Lydia raced away from the property. "What is the matter?" Jane inquired of Lizzie. "It's Mr. Collins," Lizzie grumbled. "I just returned from Charlotte Lucas's to find the man coming up the road." Jane could not comprehend the danger her sisters felt with the presence of their cousin. The gentleman may enjoy complimenting himself and boasting about his connections, but he was also kind and noble. "You are fortunate to have no worries when it comes to Mr. Collins," Lizzie spoke, taking the basket from Jane so as to look busy, "for you have Mr. Bingley." At these words Jane's expression fell, and she knew her sister could sense her dismay. "Mr. Bingley will come back," Lizzie assured her. Try as she could to hold on to the same enthusiasm her sister had, Jane couldn't. When Charles Bingley, the man whom she thought would marry her one day, suddenly left the country last autumn without any notice, Jane's hopes of a happy future were diminished. "Oh, Lizzie, I've stopped dreaming of Mr. Bingley's return," Jane confessed. "I have convinced myself that he left so suddenly because he learned of another woman. London is full of beautiful women, you see, and all more accomplished than myself." Lizzie laughed. "My dearest sister, you do not believe that? I have never heard you speak such nonsense." "He hasn't written since he left." Jane tried to hold her temper, to remain the sweet, gentle soul her family always knew her to be, but she struggled. She twisted a string bean in her hands instead. "I have accepted that he no longer cherishes what we have, or rather had, and we are no more." Lizzie dropped the basket onto the ground and grabbed her sister's hands, squeezing them tightly. "I know you are heartbroken, my dear sister, but please do not despair. I know that Mr. Bingley still loves you." There was silence as Lizzie fought to find more convincing words. "Business took him away, and work has occupied his time. That is all. Think nothing more of the matter." Jane could not believe Lizzie. Mr. Bingley had been gone for too long, and he had not written nor responded to the letters she had sent to his London residence. She had accepted that the man she loved had moved on, and so must she. It was at that moment that their mamma summoned the sisters into the house, bidding them enter with haste. Jane soon found herself in the family drawing-room with her mother and sisters, Lizzie and Mary. Mr. Collins was seated across from the 4 women. "It is always such a pleasure to be at Longbourn," the clergyman remarked, "and to be with such fine women." "Mr. Collins, you are too kind," said Mrs. Bennet, smiling all too sweetly. When Mr. Collins confessed he had not been at Longbourn for some time, and he wished to see how the estate and family were faring, Mrs. Bennet insisted he walk the grounds and admire the changes she made to the gardens. Before she could ask any specific daughter to promenade with the gentleman, Lizzie admitted that she had been ailing from a headache and must be excused from the exercise. Jane, who felt the need for distractions, volunteered to join Mr. Collins and take a walk about the gardens. "Mary, you must go along as well," said mamma. You sit too long at the piano. You need some air." Mary could not complain, and the three were soon in the outdoors. It was a sunny day, which calmed the cool breeze that clung to the air. "Longbourn is such a wonderful estate," Mr. Collins remarked. "Indeed it is," said Jane. "I know it must be hard for you, cousin, to accept that I may one day be its owner." Jane shook her head. "Not at all, Mr. Collins, for by the time papa passes, I should hope to be mistress of my own home, if not governess to a brood of children elsewhere." "Ah, yes, and I dare say, cousin, that you will make a fine mistress. What man would not cherish your sweet, gentle disposition? Of course, if my memory serves me correctly, you are engaged to a gentleman at present, a Mr. Bingley, is it not?" "Your words are too kind, Mr. Collins, but I'm afraid I do not know what my current predicament is." At these words Mr. Collins ceased walking and laughed. "You amuse me, cousin Jane. This is why I enjoy coming to Longbourn, for entertainment and friendly faces. How can you possibly not know your current situation?" When Mr. Collins met James's eyes, he saw nothing but sincerity, and his expression turned puzzle. "Oh? Why, what is the matter, dear cousin?" Mary, who had been paying little attention to her sister and cousin, bumped into the two still figures before adding, "What Jane means to say is that with Mr. Bingley's long absence, she is uncertain of their relationship." Jane wished Longbourn contained less sisters, for her troubles would not be so easily noticeable and spoken of. Mr. Collins' eyebrows rose, and he immediately stated, "Cousin, you mustn't have doubt nor fear, for love," before quickly being interrupted by the subject. "I cannot call it love, for I do not believe he loves me any longer." Jane was unsure as to why she was being so honest with Mr. Collins. Perhaps what Lizzie said was true. Jane need not worry about Mr. Collins making his advances toward her, as he recalled her relationship with Mr. Bingley. Mr. Collins seemed to respect her, and she felt safe to confide in him and in Mary. "Love is mysterious, dear cousin," Mr. Collins continued. "Why, Lady Catherine de Bourgh confided in me that when first she met her late husband she felt no love for him, but in time she came to love him. 'Mr. Collins,' she said, 'I knew not when I fell in love with my late husband, but I am fortunate I did. You see, cousin, love cannot be seen. One just has to believe in it. I myself believe I will find love very soon indeed.'" Mr. Collins smiled to himself and continued the promenade once more. "Might I add," said Mary, "that should one not be open to love, it may just pass one by." "Very wise words, cousin Mary, for you are right. Love can be fleeting, and one could miss the opportunity." Jane could not comprehend Mr. Collins nor Mary's words. She felt both their intelligent minds connected better with one another than with her own. She was soon walking behind the two as Mr. Collins and Mary spoke of subjects Jane knew little of. When they returned to the house, Lydia and Kitty came rushing forward. "Come, Jane!" they cried in unison. "Whatever for? Is papa ill?" In truth, their papa always hid in his study to avoid mamma, so if he were to ever fall ill, no family member would know. "It's Mr. Bingley," said Lydia. "He has just arrived," added Kitty. Thank you for listening to the excerpt of Mr. Bingley's Daring Proposal by Lisa Shimkus. For more information on how to obtain your own copy of Mr. Bingley's Daring Proposal, please see the description box below. Thank you and have a lovely day. Bye.